All right, welcome everybody to this training. I'm going to go ahead and start by talking a little bit about who ECPAC is in case you are new to us, and then we'll dive into why this training is so important for us to have you attend today. I'm going to move you guys up to the top here so that we don't see your faces on the recording as much. So who is ECPAC? In case you're not familiar with the Early Childhood Partnership of Adams County, we have a mission to build a community where every young child and their family can reach their full potential, with the ultimate goal that all children enter school healthy and ready to succeed. And so the way in which we believe that we can do that is to cultivate an early childhood ecosystem for children from the ages of birth to 5 and their families in Adams County. And we define this ecosystem by ensuring that every child and family in Adams County has equitable access to the high quality and affordable services and supports they need to thrive. So what does this look like? We believe that cultivating an effective early childhood ecosystem requires whole community collaborative impact. And so what that means to us is that we work closely with those who have an impact on children's young lives. And that can include those who care for children, such as parents and families, those who support children, such as our community providers, many of you on the phone today, those who teach children, such as our childcare programs and our schools, and then those who invest in children, whether that be our funders or other key stakeholders, such as elected officials who are investing their time to support solid policies. And that we believe by working together, we strengthen the connections between these groups, we fill the gaps in resources, and we increase the quality of care and support and education for children and their families. And so this is kind of what that ecosystem looks like for us. It's really thinking about everything that a family needs in order to best raise their child in Adams County, and that these pieces are working well together to support children and families there in the middle. We also can see from these puzzle pieces that there are white lines that exist between each area of service that a family might be able to receive, or each type of support they need, such as social connections. And that white space is an opportunity for us to work and collaborate, or it's an opportunity for families to fall through the cracks. And so we are working closely together so that families do not fall through the cracks, and instead we are supporting them through a holistic ecosystem. There are 3 areas of work that ECPAC does. Our first bucket is systems work, and through our partnerships with community providers and with our families, we work to address the barriers that exist for young children and families and having that equitable access to services and supports. We work to improve policy. We work to increase funding and investment that comes into our community. And we work to increase public awareness so that early childhood and what families need is a top priority in this community. We also work in the bucket of early learning, and that's where we're working directly with childcare providers, whether they be a center-based provider or a family home provider or a school district or city-based program, on helping more providers become licensed so that we have enough childcare and preschool in our community, so that those programs are of high quality, and that those staff feel supported through their professional development to deliver high quality care. And then our final bucket is our child, family, health, and well-being bucket. And this is where we work directly with families to connect them to resources in the community. We provide parenting classes and family classes and groups. And then when funding is available, we also provide emergency supplies such as food and clothing, diapers, and wipes. And in the end, what we're really trying to work towards is either preventing or mitigating against the impacts of things we know that exist in this community that impact children's readiness for school. And that's child poverty, child abuse and neglect, children born to mothers with 3 or more risk factors, as well as long-term poor academic outcomes. So our hope is that by working with our community partners and with our families, that we are either preventing these things from happening or at least mitigating against the impact they can have on child development. And so we do have a new strategic plan that started about a year ago. I don't expect you to fully see this slide, but what we're looking at doing today is that second goal, which is the yellow one. And that is that we're working towards the outcome that children and families experience services and supports that honor their needs, their culture, and their lived experience. And the way that we do this is that we work together to champion high quality, family-centered, and equitable programs and best practices by actively supporting our partners to adopt these best practices. And also for us to adopt them within our own internal ECPAC processes. So before I get started, I'm just going to stop for a minute because we've had a few people join, and just say that if you would please put your name in the chat, that is the way in which we will record your attendance for today. So today we're going to talk about the two-generation approach as being one of those best practices that we believe can really support families in our community. What we know is often we have fragmented policies and programs that address the needs of children and parents separately and don't really take the full family into consideration. So the solution is to think about our services and our supports and our programs and our policies in a way that honors children and their parents together so that we can harness the family's full potential and put the entire family on a path to permanent economic security. The two-generation approach was really identified as a way to help families move in their social economic status and have that social economic mobility to put them on the path towards living out of poverty. But there's also several other frameworks that ECPAC embraces and utilizes that are strongly related to this two-generation approach. The first one is the Strengthening Families model, which really talks about 5 protective factors that help prevent against child abuse and neglect, but also in general, help our families to be strong so they can best support their children. And that is that parents have resilience, they're connected with others in their community to support them, they have knowledge about parenting and child development so that they have appropriate child development expectations, that they're provided with what they need in times that are challenging for them, whether that be financial support, affordable housing, job training, and that also they know how to support their child's social emotional development, as we know that without strong social emotional development, children's behaviors can be seen as challenging and lead to abuse and neglect. We also think about the social determinants of health. I see that the T got cut off there and determinants at the top, so apologize for that. And that is really thinking about the things that need to be in place for people to have lifelong health, whether that be physical health or mental health. And these are all some of the same things that you're going to see in the two-generation approach. They need to have access to transportation, to affordable housing, to employment, to health systems and services, to safety, to being connected with others in their community, and for them and their children to have strong educational foundation. And so similarly, we adopt the two-generation approach, which really just talks about the fact that we want to provide opportunities for and meet the needs of children and their families, whether that be their parents or other adults in their lives together. So as you can see off to the left-hand side, many of us on this call provide child family services. Some of us on the call provide parent-focused services, whether that be around parenting classes or whether that be an adult mental health program. And so what we want to do is start to think about our services in a way that support the whole family. So in between those kind of far ends are some steps that we can take or that some folks take to get closer to that middle. So for those of us who provide child-focused services, we recognize how important it is to support parents, but we're still really focused on supporting parents for that child outcome. For those of us potentially on the phone that are more focused on parents, we strongly believe in supporting those parents and their needs around their children, whether that be having access to childcare so that they can go to work. But what we want to do is really move us to the middle, where we're thinking about children and parents and their outcomes as a whole family versus separately. And so the two-generation approach, very similar to those other frameworks that I talked to you about, has 5 different areas that they believe are really important to think about as we try to help families improve their social economic mobility, as well as have a strong family. And that first cog is early childhood development. Do families have access to strong early childhood programming in their community, whether that be a center-based program, a preschool program, a family childcare home, a home visitation program, a parenting class, anything that's needed to really support strong child development. We also need to make sure that our community has post-secondary and employment pathways. Oftentimes, many of our pathways are focused on teenagers coming straight out of school. And we want to make sure that there are strong pathways for those moms who may have stayed at home while their children were young and want to get back into the workforce as their children enter school age. We also want to think about those economic assets that are so critically important for families to have the strong foundation so that they can go back to work or they can go back to school. And that's really making sure that families have access to affordable housing and other public supports, that they have transportation, that they have enough money to potentially get things started for them that they may need. We obviously know that health and well-being and access to those types of services are critically important. If a parent is struggling with mental health or substance use, it will be really hard for that parent to work. It may be hard for that parent to continue to stay within their home. So we want to make sure that children and families have access to those health and well-being supports. The same can be said for children who have mental health concerns. It'll be hard for families to stay in their job if they're having to leave their job to go pick up their child because of a challenging behavior at school. And then finally, wanting to make sure that families have social capital. And those are those connections to others in our community, whether they be our friends, our families, our neighbors. Parenting is really hard, and we need to make sure that we have others that we can rely on when times get tough, whether it be just to talk to them or potentially borrow something. In addition to that, there are professional ways in which that social capital can be built as well. And that's having strong relationships with the providers of services, or also potentially having parenting classes where they can connect to other families. And so what you can see here are these cogs, and you can imagine these cogs working together. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is wanting to make sure that all of these things exist in our community, but also that we are working closely together with each other so that families don't fall through the cracks. It may mean that you start to do assessments with families in new ways to consider some of these other things that they may need in order to get on the path towards being a strong and family that is thriving. So that's kind of the gist of the two-generation approach, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper. And then the last piece I want to talk about is with two-generation approaches, and I mentioned this earlier, we want to think about two-generation approaches in our programming. So are there ways that our program can offer one or more of those cogs that I had shown just a minute ago? And if not, are we at least have really strong partnerships in our community with those other cogs so that we can help families get connected to those services without falling through the cracks? Are we addressing policies that bring these types of services together? One of the things that we've talked about as an early childhood partnership is that often it's easy for us to stay up in early childhood development. But we also need to be advocating for policies that address affordable housing. We need to be advocating for policies that address families having the insurance they need so that they can have mental health supports. We want to address policies that may support families having apprenticeship programs so that they can jump into employment pathways. And so it's stepping outside of the box that we generally live in or work in and really understanding how we can be a support for some of those bigger system issues. And then the systems piece is that partnership, those connections with each other, making sure that we're working closely together. And then finally, research. And the way that I think about this is more about outcomes. We all collect outcomes on how the people we serve are doing. Are we collecting outcomes for both children and for families? Are we showing the difference that we make for children and for families? And if you want to learn more about this model, there are so many resources online, at ascend.aspeninstitute.org. They have tons of briefs on each of those COG areas with a variety of different ways in which people across the nation are looking at this two-generation approach and hoping to implement it within their own community. So I strongly encourage you to go to this website and dive deeper into the things that interest you most. So why is a two-generation model important for post-secondary and employment pathways? And I'm not going to go over this in depth, but as you see at the bottom in that red box, I want you to think about this from your own program and think about what are the ways in which my program supports post-secondary employment pathways. Maybe I don't offer that service, but I at least know where families can go to get this service. Are there policies that maybe I want to start thinking about that I can advocate for that are coming up in this next legislative session? Are there better ways that I could partner with these types of organizations in my community? Or are there ways that I could make sure that we are measuring impact that our program is having on these post-secondary and employment pathways? And so why is that important? Right there in the middle. Parents' level of education attainment is a strong predictor of children's educational and economic outcomes. And that we know that if we link workforce with education and supportive services with early childhood and education programs, families are more likely to be able to stay in their employment. So in case you were not aware, we only have one child care slot available for every 3 children in Adams County whose parents are in the workforce. And that means all parents in the workforce, whether they be from a single parent home or a 2-parent home. That means for every child care slot we have available, only 1 child gets that, and the other 2 families are scrambling to try to figure out how they can get to work or back to school so that their children can attend a high quality program and they can work. We also know with post-secondary employment that, or education, that in Colorado, 17% or 1 out of every 6 undergraduate students is a parent. And therefore, what is our higher education system doing to ensure those students have access to services they need both for themselves as well for their children? We know that compared to their peers without children, student parents are 3.5 times more likely to graduate. And that student parents have unique challenges that influence their ability to continue on their education. And then when we think about children's education, in Adams County, we have, you'll see that red line there in the middle is how children are doing in kindergarten when they enter kindergarten based on an assessment that looks at 6 developmental areas. In Colorado, about 48% of children are entering kindergarten meeting all expectations in those 6 developmental areas. In Adams County, only 38% of children are entering kindergarten meeting all expectations in those 6 developmental areas. And when we look at the impact of poverty Our district with the highest free and reduced lunch rate, sorry that those F and R should be switched around. We're looking at only 15% of children are entering kindergarten meeting those developmental expectations. And then as you can see, while it may not be a direct correlation because the tests are slightly different, we only have 40% of children in Adams County who are on grade level for 4th grade English and 28% that are on grade level for 8th grade math. You can see this doesn't vary dramatically from Colorado, but we can see that there on the bottom, our district with the highest free and reduced lunch rate, there is a large gap. And that means our families who are struggling in poverty also are having huge impacts for their children's education and future socioeconomic stability. So when we look at health and well-being, we know that when families don't have stable mental health support, it can be challenging to be successful in other areas of life. And so we want to make sure when we think about our programs and our policies and our systems, as well as the outcomes that we measure within our program, thinking about families' access to mental health and substance use, thinking about access to child mental health, to insurance, to making sure that families are living in a healthy area, that they have their basic needs met, that we're ensuring that children are not being exposed to toxic stress, such as abuse and neglect, a parent with a mental health or substance use concern, that we're really helping to make sure that families are thinking about their planning for pregnancy. And then finally, those parent-child relationships, which greatly impact social emotional development. So it's very important for us to look at health and well-being from both a parent perspective, a child perspective, and a family perspective. So again, how is your program doing that? It's not required that you offer this service, but if you don't offer this service, is there a way that you can make sure you're connected to the programs that do? Are there ways within your program that you could support families' stress level? And if so, how are you able to measure that? So in Adams County, kind of our current health and well-being is that we do know that we, in the past, when counties were rated across Colorado, we often ranked in the bottom 5 of the 25 rated communities for overall child health and well-being. And really that was based on the fact that we have more children living in poverty, our child abuse and neglect rate is higher, we have more children born to mothers with 3 or more risk factors, and Adams County is considered the most populated area or most concentrated area for children at risk of social emotional concerns. So this is not to feel overwhelmed by, but it's more to say, is there something my program can do to support more families moving out of poverty or to have better economic stability? Is there more my program can do to help strengthen those 5 protective factors so that children are experiencing less abuse and neglect? Is there something we can do to really focus our support on children who are born to a single mother or to a teen parent or to a mother with less than 12 years of education? So those are the pieces that we want to think about as we think about our programs, our policies, our systems, and our outcomes. This is the map that I just talked about that shows that Adams County in that dark blue compared to other areas of our community where children are most at risk for social emotional concerns. And when I said Adams County has the highest concentrated area, when we look at all these bottom areas that are also in dark blue, when you add all the children living in those areas together, that is less children than lives in Adams County. The yellow dots are talking about how much investment is coming into our community compared to the number of children who live here. So you can see that we do not have enough investment coming into our community to help prevent those social emotional concerns. Your programs are ways in which we can think about improving investment in having programs that serve young children and families and support those social emotional concerns or prevent them. So the next one is economic assets. So we all know what these are. We know that families need access to basic needs that include housing, food assistance, financial education, transportation. We have a huge opportunity that would just came out with families being eligible for tax credits. How are we making sure that families have access to those tax credits and that they're getting those? Student financial aid and children's savings account. And one of the things that really, they've said that these child tax credits that just got approved can help families move out of poverty. And it's true because these tax credits are about $3,000 per child. And an increased family income during the early childhood years of just $3,000 per year can result in children earning 17% more as an adult than if their family did not have that $3,000 per year. So our current state of economic assets in Adams County is that we know that families are moving forward after the most recent recession and COVID. And we did see poverty decrease for the first time after the recession, which was 1 year behind the state. But now as we think about COVID and recovering from COVID, it's likely that Adams County will also be behind the state recovering from COVID. We know that Adams County is changing dramatically due to the high cost of housing in Denver, and that's increasing housing in Adams County. So how are we making sure that the cities and the counties are planning more affordable housing here in Adams County and not having gentrification pushing our families to other communities? We know that disparities and inequities exist where we have high concentration of poverty. Those families have less access to affordable, healthy food. And one of the things that just recently happened for those of you in Westminster, we know that Walmart off of Federal just closed. Safeway, that used to be there, closed a couple of years ago. These families now have no access to any type of healthy, affordable food. And so Growing Home and Maker Housing and ECPAC are working closely together, primarily Growing Home, to talk with the city about what is it that pushes businesses out of this community and how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again and that we can actually attract these types of grocery stores into our community. And then when we think about early childhood education, why is this important? And hopefully most folks on the call today are in early childhood education or in early childhood developmental programming. But we often have people that attend this training that are more on the adult side. And so it's really trying to help everyone understand that the research shows that when children attend, especially children in poverty, attend a high quality early care and education program, they're less likely to be a teen parent, less likely to become involved in juvenile justice, more likely to have good grades, more likely to graduate, and actually are more likely to make more money than their peers living in poverty who did not attend a high quality early care and education program at the age of 27. And so in this early care and education, we really need to think about ways in which we're engaging families and ensuring that parents have enrichment opportunities, that they have access to early intervention, and that our home visitation programs are a great way in which we can ensure that families who may not be sending their child to childcare or to preschool have access to services that will support their children's development. We have 6 home visitation programs in Adams County, so there are lots of ways in which families can find the right fit for them. So at the current state of early care and education, I already said that there is only 1 slot available for every 3 children who need it. I've noted that we have 6 home visitation programs, but one of the things I want to share with you down here below in this picture is that it is recommended that families only spend 7% of their income on childcare. Right now, we know that a 2-parent household with 2 young children is spending almost double that. 13% of their income is on childcare. And when we look at a single parent household, we know that they're spending close to 43% on childcare. And when we look at the cost of housing, we know that a single parent needs to make $58,000 if she has 2 children or he has 2 children in order to afford housing and childcare. And we know that that's not what our families are making. And then finally, for social capital, this is kind of that soft piece of what families need. And it often gets neglected or not considered when we are thinking about having hard resources available for families. But having peer support, having family, friends, and neighbors who are supportive, those community and faith-based organizations, we really need to make sure that social capital and the network that people can rely upon is a critical contributor to the well-being of children and their parents. We all who are parents know what it feels like to have a child who's having a challenging behavior, to not being able to find something that our child needs, to not being able to afford what we want to be able to give our children, and having others that we can talk to is critically important to not feeling isolated. So there's lots of ways in which we are thinking about this at ECPAC, and I really encourage you to think about it within your own programs, ways in which you're bringing the families together that you support. We know that in our community cafes and the focus groups that we've done, our families have said to us, you know what, connecting to other parents is much harder than I ever expected. It's not as easy as it used to be. Many of us come and we do our thing and we go home and we close our doors. Families are saying they want more opportunities like play groups so that they can get together with other families and other adults. They're feeling very disconnected from their neighbors. We don't know our neighbors like we used to. Families also said, I don't know where or when classes are happening, even though I'm actively involved in community services. It doesn't feel like all of my community service providers know where some of these classes are happening. And a family reported that by going to a parenting class, they don't feel so alone. We know that COVID has made this more challenging for our families to get together. And so any way that we can think about how we can connect families during this time where having large groups is discouraged is really important. One of the things we're doing at ECPAC is to really support these social connection messages, and we have lots of materials that we'd be happy to share with you. We have social media posts that we'd be happy to share with you. But basically saying, you know, guiding your family through tough times can be hard to do alone. All families need support to raise happy, healthy kids. So how are we destigmatizing that help-seeking behavior and help-accepting behavior? So in the end, I'd like to wrap up by just saying that I recognize that there are a few barriers to implementing a 2-generation approach in our community and in your organization. One is that many of us receive grants or funding for certain services, and it can be hard to utilize our funding flexibly so that we can think about this 2-generation model, so that we can think about ways to use our funding that support both families and parents and children. We know that building relationships with diverse partners can also be challenging. Some of you may be coming from a very child world, and to build relationships with those who come from the adult serving world can be challenging. And I've heard that's even challenging within the same organization. So how are we kind of stepping out of our comfort zone and really trying to understand how other services are provided and help others understand the services that we provide? And then helping our staff and our coworkers really make those practice shifts to supporting the whole family. It's easy for those of us who work with children to work with children. That's where our comfort zone is. It's where we enjoy our time. It's where we have the most experience. So how do we step outside that comfort zone and begin having more interactions with the adults and the parents that come and support those children? And how do we also consider measuring those family outcomes? So in wrapping up, there's just 5 core principles that Aspen Institute recommends. And so I would love to just go over those for a minute. And the first is, again, measure and account for outcomes both at the child and family level. We want to engage and listen to the voices of families. How are we engaging families in programmatic decisions so that we ensure that our programs best meet the needs of the families that we're working with? How do we foster innovation and evidence together? How do we not do business as usual, but actually work to change the way we do business, even if it feels uncomfortable, so that we're doing more of a 2-generation approach? We want to make sure that we're aligning and linking our systems and our funding streams so that we can offer this more comprehensive, holistic approach, and always keeping equity in mind. We know that there are families that we work with who need a greater level of support. We know that there are families we work with who are walking through our doors who have experienced racial institutional discrimination and don't trust the system. How are we changing the way we do business so that they no longer have that experience? So what I'd like you to think about, and we'll just open it up for a few minutes of small group discussion or large group discussion, is where do you see yourself fitting in? Where do you have access to others who can help you serve families in a more holistic way? And where do you think you need more information and more partnership so that you can better serve families in a more holistic way? So I would invite folks to unmute, or if you're not comfortable unmuting, to answer one of these questions. If you would just throw a few things into the chat, I would be happy to just read those out loud. I see someone has put in their Circle of Parents is an excellent nationwide model. Actually, we do have Circle of Parents in recovery here in Adams County through ECPAC, but yes, Circle of Parents is an amazing model that is growing, and it looks like the resource for that website has been put into the chat. Lisa, are you aware of agencies that provide parent support groups in Adams County? We do provide parent support groups here at ECPAC. Those support groups are kind of waning a little bit as COVID is kind of winding down and we're moving back into our actual parent curriculum classes, but I'm happy to always reintroduce those back in. Focus Points is a family resource center, and they do offer services in several of these areas. And I do believe family resource centers are a great way for us to think about this holistic approach to serving families. Any other thoughts for folks? Where do you feel like you need greater partnerships or greater level of effort in serving families in this more holistic way? Where do things seem to be lacking? I don't want to focus on the negative, but just curious. So resources for low-income, undocumented children, folks with children who need services is definitely lacking, absolutely. All right. Immigration, legal resources, fatherhood engagement. Thank you, Elizabeth. Lots of ideas. Oh, now they're all coming in. Parenting classes for families, resources for affordable housing. I could use additional resources for parents who have disabilities, who live with adult children. So I would say if there's anyone on the phone who is able to direct folks somewhere, this is a partnership and we would love to make sure that everyone in our community is aware of what exists. As you're doing that, so if you know of something that exists for parents with disabilities and adult children, resources around immigration, on documentation, please throw those in the chat so that we can make sure that everyone has access to those. I do want to just share with you on our website, we do have a lot around young children and families. We do not have as much for parents with older children, but we'll say that if you go to our website, you will see this will pop up. We have it in English and in Spanish. And what you basically can do is click on one of these puzzle pieces, and I'm going to see if it actually works here. It might not. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Yes, here it comes. Many of you have already seen this before, so thanks for your patience. What you basically can do is click on one of these puzzle pieces if you're looking for a resource for families. So either information on child development in case a family is not quite sure what they can be doing to support their child's development. Expecting and new parents has information for teen parents as well as for older parents. Family services and education. Community resources is housing and food banks and legal assistance and transportation. Childcare is where you can find childcare, as well as how you can help families apply for the Child Care Assistance Program, where they can find out more about the Colorado Preschool Program. And then under health, we have information on medical, developmental, oral, and mental health. And so I'll just show you a quick example. If you click on the puzzle piece, you will come to a list of headers. And so if you want to learn more about home visitation programs, classes for parents and caregivers, workshops, support groups, or information on keeping kids safe, you just click on that and it pulls up the list of everything that we're aware of that exists in Adams County under that area. So if you see something that we have missed, please do let us know and we would be happy to make sure that it gets added to our website. Again, we have that in English and in Spanish. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just open it up for any final questions or thoughts or comments. Thank you for putting a few things in the chat in terms of helping our partners here on the phone know about certain resources. Is there any other last comments that folks have? All right, well, I'm going to stop recording, but I will leave it open for a few minutes for those of you who are still wanting to share resources. I will let you know that I am sending out an evaluation. I really would like you